It took me 3 years, but for my wife I was patient. Hi everyone, welcome back to another Reddit cheating story. Before we start, please hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so you won't miss another cheating story goes live. This was back in 2013 when I was based in Holland, British Marine for context. I had been married to my wife for a little over 18 months when I deployed to Afghanistan. My wife had a job in the British delegation on base and got to know pretty much every Brit and their husband/wife. One day we were directly targeted by a vehicle born eyed. Now, whilst it wasn't uncommon for there to be a threat to coalition forces in general, being directly targeted felt more personal for obvious reasons. That was also the day I found out about an RAF guy back in Holland who had tried it on with my wife. I found him on Facebook and, still feeling rather raw about Terry trying to blow me up, messaged him words to the effect of, "If you go near Mrs. Von_Scranhammer again, I will put glass in your throat the next time I see you." The next day one of my bosses, who was also RAF, messaged me on Facebook to say that this guy had been over to his office and basically tattled on me. He gave me a friendly warning/heads up that this guy could have gone to the MPs and reported me. I have no idea what would have happened, but Elle acknowledged the warning and said it won't happen again. My boss had my back and actually told him to wind his neck. Fast forward to when Elle got back from Afghan. A few days had passed and Elle was starting to settle into a normal life again. My wife brought it up, after explaining she didn't mention it at the time due to my reaction the first time, that an Army sergeant major had tried to message her via Facebook. He told her she was beautiful and wanted her number. She promptly blocked him. I was pissed off to say the least, but I understand why she kept it until Elle was back on home soil. The next day Elle went into our department and spoke to my other boss, an Army captain. I told him what had happened and he said, "Leave it with me." He basically had a chat with him and nothing came of it. I felt deflated and even more pissed off. That was until our senior military officer came into our department. He welcomed me back and asked how my tour was. "Still pissed off," Elle said. "It was good, sir. With the exception of Sergeant Major Douchebag trying to get round my wife. He was, understandably, a little taken aback." About an hour or so later he emailed me saying that he feels the need to do something official about this. Something I had forgotten was that the colonel and sergeant major belonged to the same regiment, so having one of his own behave like this had clearly gripped him. I told him the full story and provided screenshots of what Sergeant Major Douchebag had said to Mrs. Von_Scranhammer. For this to go official, my wife had to provide a statement. Unfortunately, Mrs. Von_Scranhammer is very non-confrontational and said she didn't want this to continue. I respected her wishes, of not wanting to provide a statement, but hatched a plan that would be 3 years in the making. The timing is important. I emailed the colonel and said that Mrs. Von_Scranhammer has declined. However, I felt the need for some formal recognition, so I asked that Sergeant Major Douchebag write a letter of apology, addressed to both my wife and Elle, which is to be signed and dated. This was granted and I received said letter 2 days later. It said, "Lance Corporal and Mrs. Von_Scranhammer. I am writing this letter to you both to apologize for the torment and anxiety that you both must have felt from the messages that you received from my Facebook account. To Mrs. Von_Scranhammer. Nobody should ever be in a situation where they worry about going to work because of whom may come through the door, especially so, when they have the added stress of a partner being operationally deployed at the time. The anguish that you must have felt at this time is immeasurable, and for this, I apologize. To Lance Corporal Von_Scranhammer. Being operationally deployed is stressful enough without the added stress and worry about family back home. Support from home and loved ones is what carries many people through tough times whilst on tour. For any undue angst caused, I apologize. I regret any hurt and anguish caused by this issue and apologize, wholeheartedly and unreservedly to you both." Signed, Sergeant Major Douchebag, position held. I now waited. I spent the rest of my time in Holland, moved back to the UK to my new base and waited some more. Almost 3 years after I received the apology letter, I looked up Sergeant Major Douchebag's wife on Facebook. I had known the whole time we were out there that he was married, his wife lived back in the UK, and he has routinely tried to cheat on her. I sent her the same screenshot which I had sent to the colonel. I also, before leaving Holland, printed off the emails between the colonel and myself where I requested the apology letter. I blanked out the colonel's details and sent the pictures of that. And then, lastly, I sent a picture of the apology letter, signed and dated by her husband admitting what he had done. Once I saw she had Reddit blocked her, blocked Sergeant Major Douchebag, and all his friends who had also been out in Holland at the same time. Why 3 years? I remember him saying, before he turned into a douchebag and tried it on with my wife, that he only had 3 years left to serve. If my timing was correct, he was months away for completing his 22 years and receiving a very nice pension. If his wife decided to go ahead with divorce, she would take half of said pension, which would essentially fuck him over for the rest of his life. Here are some of the best comments from our community. Perfect revenge. I'm sure that Douche Canoe had completely forgotten about all of that. Also, from a US Marine, you guys were bonkers in Afghanistan. Ran into a few of your guys out running their ops with next to nothing, and I would see one of your bases way down south in Helmand, probably 20 to 30 kilometers away, take tracer rounds and small arms fire every night it seemed. Definitely pro-revenge, holy long game. Reminds me of this. You see, it's the slow knife, the knife that takes its time, the knife that waits years without forgetting, then slips quietly between bones. That's the knife that cuts the deepest. Here is the second story. Best friend's cheating wife got what she deserved. This happened to my best friend, John. His wife, Mizuki, was Japanese and living with him on a spousal visa. Long story short, she was banging some guy who was always an asshole to us, and now we know why. She made the mistake of telling her best friend, Aki, who lives in Japan and is also one of my close friends as well, I live in Japan. Aki was recently cheated on herself and was still very upset about the whole thing, so she tells me what Mizuki had done. John had gone back to school after being laid off, and was in the middle of finals, so I sat on this information for a couple of weeks. After finals, I told him the whole story. He took it pretty well, as it filled in a lot of holes for him. I said that many guys are way too nice when they get hurt, and convinced him to ruin this bitch. We figured out Mizuki's Facebook password. Why do women always pick the most obvious ones? And sure enough, there were pictures, conversations, etc. The icing on the cake? Her boyfriend's parents. Glorious. As it turns out, his parents were super right-wing conservative Christians. John contacted the boyfriend's mother and very politely explained who he was and what went on. She was very sorry, and promised John that Mizuki would no longer be welcome in their home. Step 1 complete. Step 2 is going to take more skill. Mizuki was pretty butthurt about John ruining her relationship. She said she would just tell her parents that John beat her. They don't speak English, so there was nothing John could do. I told him to write a letter to them, which he did, and he explained everything politely. Per my advice, he also included dated photos of them together. Aki translated the letter into Japanese for him. Mizuki had no idea this plan was in the works. She was getting ready to go home for a month to visit her family, so Aki timed the mailing of the letter so that it arrived one day before she left. Aki received a phone call from Mizuki's father stating that he agreed with John's version of events. Mizuki called John crying and called him an asshole. Now if you think this couldn't get any better, you're wrong. The wife was looking for her dream job at an industrial design firm back in the US, and had an interview lined up for when she got back. They were ready to hire her, but when the talk about her visa status came up, she explained that she was getting divorced and would lose her status. The company explained that they couldn't hire her because they don't have it in the budget to sponsor a visa. Bam. Mission complete. She's now back in Japan, and I assume working for a Japanese company, but it's far from her dream job. Here are some of the best comments from our community. Dude. Respect. Now let's hope the wife has learned her lesson. And if not, let's hope her future SO screws her over as badly as you did. I don't know if this is a wrong thing to say, and I'm sorry if I offend someone, but one must be very careful with Japanese partners. If you go check out their videos where they ask public opinion on cheating, they are very okay. That's a red flag. The whole country is a red flag. That said, I'm not saying people from other countries are good. Cheaters are cheaters, but when their society is itself so chill, I suggest staying away from them. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell for any future cheating stories.